On today's Toy Spot, we're having a look at we're having a look more at Batman toys. Today we're having a look though at the Dark Knight Stealth Launch Batmobile. Another toy that I wanted to review a while back, and I just never did. As you can see, it's still sealed. It is still completely sealed. But now with the Dark Knight Rises, soon to be released in theaters, it gives Spot a chance to go back and review some of the toys that I never got a chance to review before. I guess we've all benefited from this in some way. The Tumbler, or the Stealth Launch Batmobile, has two vehicles. It does launch a bat pod from inside. Now that wasn't obviously the draw for me. Well, I shouldn't say obviously. You don't know. You don't really know what my thought pattern was at the time. One of the things I really liked about this was the fact it was a black Batmobile. If you saw my other review of the Batman Begins Tumbler, sadly the original Batmobile, the original Tumbler that I bought, was the wrong color. I didn't get the second release, which was the more movie accurate. So to get a more movie accurate colored Tumbler was probably the real reason why I bought this self-launch Batmobile. Down below we got the same picture of Christian Bale. Very angry. He is very, very angry. And on the side, launch the bat pod. Again, depicted from the Dark Knight Rises, or the Dark Knight. Batman loses his Tumbler. Lone tear, by the way, a lone tear when that Tumbler. Poor Tumbler. On the back, 2-in-1. Stealth Launch Batmobile. On the bottom, this is what's rather interesting. On the bottom, they've decided to actually picture what looks to be a Batman Begins figure. It may not be. It might actually be a Dark Knight, but it does look like a Batman Begins figure. It says works with most 5.7-inch figures. Also, do not aim at eyes or face. Only use projectiles supplied with this toy. Do not fire at point-blank range. Which is everything that I'm reading right here. So Mattel is generally concerned for our well-being. There's the package, a very large box, out of the way. I am going to take a bit of a break. I'm going to get this opened up, and when we come back, we're going to get a better look at the Dark Knight Stealth Launch Batmobile. Stay tuned, there's more on the way. And now out of the box, let's have a look at the Tumbler. It's roughly about the same size. If you saw the Batman Begins Tumbler that I reviewed, it's roughly about the same size. Even though it is the same size, even though it's got more of a gimmick, I would say, to it, it's not as impressive, I find, as the Batman Begins Tumbler. For starters, the Batman Begins Tumbler had rubber tires. Obviously this area here all lit up and it made sound effects and everything else like that, but this Tumbler, these tires are basically just plastic. They're just plastic pieces. There's a little more detail, don't get me wrong, but rubber tires would have really made this a nice toy. Same can be said in the front. These aren't rubber, they're just basically a plastic tire. Likely, though, I don't think a lot of people are all that concerned with it because there's a lot more to this Tumbler than there was with the Batman Begins Tumbler. Coloring-wise, there's also a little bit of gold going up by the top there, by the actual panels. This would have been just a solid black on the other one, or in my case, it would have been I guess it was black on the other one as well, even though mine was a purple vehicle. It rolls really, really well. There are your standard tires on the bottom. There's the actual mechanics. There's a little more going on. There's actually a couple other tires going on there as well. But it rolls pretty good. Now the cockpit on the Batman Begins Batmobile would have opened up right here. This whole piece would have opened up. In this case, because there's actually something going on in the front, the cockpit is actually right up here. And we're just going to open it up. And I don't know if you can see it or not, Batman is in there. Well, there's going to be a surprise going on in here anyways. But you can't really put anything in there just yet because of what's going to happen. So I'm just going to close this for now. We'll get back to it. Don't worry. Spot, we'll get back to it. I will say though, the cockpit is not the easiest to open and close. But overall, it's not a bad vehicle. It's not a bad vehicle. It's a shame. It would have been nice if they had incorporated the rubber tires and everything into this one. But I can see that it was a cheaper alternative because a lot of it relies heavily on the gimmick. Speaking of gimmick, you'll notice in this case the buttons. There's button 1 and there's button 2. Both buttons are black. Really good. It's not red, it's not bright red or anything like that, like the other Tumbler was. You can see right there, 1 and 2. What we are going to do, I'm going to press the first button here. Button 1, we're going to do it in order. I'm going to press button 1 here, and hopefully, if I can get my arm out of the way, when you press button 1, this whole front cockpit, basically the whole front end of the Tumbler opens up. So far, pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. When it also opens up, it also makes these side missile launchers visible. And basically, these will pop up. To fire them, there's a black button on either side. Just fire it off. Boom, boom. And it fires off 2 red missiles. Once opened, it looks very similar to what it did in the movie. Of course, one of the tires, is revving in the movie as the poor Tumbler crippled, defeated, if you will. And then as for the second button, button number 2, right here, when we press button 2, I'm going to put my hand here for a reason. There's a reason for it. When we press button number 2, goodbye. It fires off. It fires off Batman in the Batpod. That is very, very cool. Now the Batman itself, we're going to zoom in and focus our attention on the Batpod here. Batpod is pretty detailed. It's just plastic. There's really no paint or anything on there. It's just a solid black piece. The Batman on top of the Batpod is just a standard staction piece. It doesn't do anything. In fact, it's permanently on the Batpod. I would have liked... I know they wanted to make this a complete play set where you didn't have to need other figures, but I would have preferred if they had actually had the Batpod with nothing on top, with no figure or anything like that on top, and then if you had a Batman figure, you could put the Batman figure on the Batpod, and then you can still play with it. I mean, you can still play with it, but I always really get disappointed when they make cycles, bikes of any toy line. And they always generally have a figure permanently mounted, permanently part of the vehicle. I find it just kind of takes away from it. I'm somebody that, as a kid, I would have, with G.I. Joes and everything else, everything was removable. The vehicle you bought separately, you put your figure on top. Speaking of figures, I want to draw your attention to Batman here. I think Batman needs a little sleep. He's got some red eyes going on there. I've been up all night. Oh, I wish Joker would just surrender already. But it's a neat. I love this little Tumbler set. Again, the Batpod is removable. Once we have the Batpod out, I'm basically just going to close off the top piece of the Tumbler. I'm going to close those, snap that back into place, and then we can go back to that cockpit we were talking about earlier. And you now have a spot, you now have a space where you can put a figure. Now it's entirely up to you what kind of figure you want to use. I have here a deluxe Batman figure from the Dark Knight Rises. Or not really, the Dark Knight Rises, from the Dark Knight line. And he fits in there pretty good. He will flop around there. He will, move all over the place. Luckily though, if you lose Batman, you can't get him out. You basically can just open that up. Oh, there's Batman. There he is right there. There he is right there. If I also bring in the Dark Knight Rises Batman, the much smaller 4-inch scale figure, obviously he's way too small to accommodate into this Tumbler, so I would say your best bet is likely stick with the deluxe figures from either the Dark Knight Rises, or sorry, the Dark Knight or Batman Begins. Those are probably your best figures for this vehicle. Moving those off camera. We don't need to see them ever again. I wish I could have done it in this review and showed you the distance on this vehicle. I mean, the Batpod itself goes pretty far. You didn't see it, but I was playing with it before I, before I did this end of the review, and my cats were getting pretty crazy over it. I like this addition. When you're done, you're just going to snap that back into place, close off this cockpit, and then snap these into place, and once again you've got yourself a really neat Tumbler. I don't really like the tabs on the top again of the cockpit panel, the top cover door here. But that aside, it's not a bad vehicle, and it's definitely got a lot of play value for the kids out there. What would I give a rating for the Stealth Batmobile here? Well, I would probably give it, for play value, I would probably give it a 7. Ways I would have improved the actual toy, I would have really, again, liked if the Batpod had no figure on it, that we could have just accommodated some of the deluxe figures. Now granted, they probably would mean the scale would be completely off. You probably wouldn't be able to accommodate this size. You might need a little larger of a Tumbler, and I can see for expense purposes why they wouldn't have done that. But still a pretty good toy overall. Today's toy spot, though, we were having a look at the Stealth Launch Batmobile. If you can find it, I'd say your best bet now is probably eBay, but if you can find it, a pretty fun toy to get. Thanks for watching, guys. As you always do, certainly there are more Batman figure reviews and toy reviews coming up. We're still a little bit away from the release of The Dark Knight Rises. Now granted, depending on when Spot uploads this, it might already be out. Who really knows, right? But thanks for watching, as you always do, guys. I will see you guys next time.